Welcome, and thank you for tuning in to Comfort Homesake's podcast, The Tea on Elderhood, where we explore what it means to be an elder. We believe in the power of people to reinvent and rebuild community, and we invite you on our journey. Because we value the youth, their voice is also at the table and, together with the wider community, we'll get to a better understanding of the need for, and value of, elderhood. Sit back and join us, along with our guests, as we engage in rich, thought-provoking, and sometimes funny dialogue. And remember, if you have a question you want us to comment on, please email us at info@comforthomesake.com. Welcome to the tea.
Hello and welcome everyone to the third episode of the Tea on Elderhood. My name is Novella and today I have with me Iya Tahira, Dodosio, and Safia. We're back today to continue exploring the connections between our community, our friends, and our families, and as always, ourselves. In the previous two episodes, we discussed what it means to be an elder and who are the elders of today. And after re-listening, we feel that there is a question of perception versus reality, and we all seem to be speaking from a different place. So today, we're taking a step back to get to the root and ask ourselves, what's the reality of the disconnections we see between elders and the community versus what is perceived? And I'd like to start by asking Iya Tahira if you could explain what the reality of the disconnections we see today with elderhood in the community is versus what we perceive it to be. Is there an example that you could think of that really does showcase that disconnection?
I'm trying to think of easy way to answer this question, because for me, I can see where the disconnect took place. The disconnect took place in that time when we moved through the civil rights era, and it's almost like we immediately became assimilated in modernity's way of thinking, and modernity's way of identifying ourselves and classifying ourselves in the world. Those who would be our elders joined that rank, and that was a disconnect. There was no longer the elders who we could go to. That was, I got mine, I made it, education, get your education, get a degree, do this and do that. But there was no one showing us the way. There was a lot of money, if you could step back in that time, pumped in the community deliberately designed to disconnect Black people from themselves. But there was no one to interpret that for us. We had what was happening. We lost leaders. We lost Martin Luther King. We lost Malcolm X. We lost the people that were stepping forward to merge that consciousness that we needed to go forward in a unified way. So that piece was destroyed for us. So those who came after that, we became assimilated in the culture, losing that way of being in community, even losing the idea of church housing and community and holding that placenta for our community. The church has become theorized. They became educated theologists, no longer the voice of a community. When I grew up, it was that someone came and said, I have a message for us today. And that message comes from someplace else. We no longer heard those voices in our community. We no longer hear them even today. Those voices are silent. And that is one of the places that we disconnect when we stop having elders, people who came through a struggle to come back and lead the way for the future generation, to interpret the way for the future generation. We had no one interpreting the way. We gave that responsibility to sociologists and psychologists, and those are the people that we would listen to the most as interpreting our way forward.
This is Delcio. I think that's an awesome setup for this conversation because there's so much there that we'll try to unpack. Um, it's really interesting to me, this notion of perception versus reality, because the other question that pops in my mind as I hear myself say it is, well, just what is reality if it's not perception? So what is the delta? What is the is it, are they two the same, or are they different?
You, Dissociate, I'm gonna say that they're different when we talk about our community and elderhood, because it's kind of like the elders held a secret for us. And, that secret was our reality, which is that, we were special, or that we were resilient. That we are people from the earth. Our elders held a secret. Their perception is that, maybe we don't have it together, or maybe, Black people don't do this, or Black people don't work, right? That the perception of us wasn't our reality. But since we lost our elders, like Mama Tahira was saying, the perception is becoming our reality. That we don't see ourselves as, ancient people of this earth, leaders in every and in every field, right? We don't see our history has been erased, and our ability to find our history um, is also erased. So the elders haven't kept the secret that we've been here before anyone else. So when that secret has passed, all we're left with the perception of deliberate disconnection.
That hit heavy for me. Perception is becoming our reality. Because another thought I have is about like our self-imposed limitations. There's people that I love the phrase like we're free and we need to act like it. We're not in slavery anymore. We're not enslaved. Yes, we have some roadblocks, but people have made it through. We can all make it through, but we having the mindset that we're still locked and we're still blocked from having access to things is limiting our growth. We are creating a reality of a form of enslavement. Until we can move past that, let go, and move forward and know who the true power that we have, we can't really get into the reality of it all.
Ia Tahira, if you could elaborate a little bit more, we're starting to get into some the juicy stuff here. Um, is there how do we get beyond the perception, the way I hear it being explained, because we have embraced a perspective that's not rooted in the truth or our reality, we are behaving in ways that are counterproductive to our growth and evolution as a people. And so I guess the question I ask Ness would be, how do we, if this is indeed the case, what are some of the things we can start thinking about doing to overcome it?
I think one of the things that came to mind is interesting. It came just pop right up there. I think one of the things I would encourage us to do is not celebrate Black history. We celebrate Black history as a beginning of we celebrate it as if it's a beginning of who we are. And what we're doing, we really celebrating that whole idea of enslaved consciousness. Just ride that. We celebrate enslaved consciousness, not taken from what, if we take our history and look at it, say, okay, these are the things that we suffered, but what have we learned through that suffering? What did we learn in the civil rights movement that will propel us forward today? As opposed to celebrating what dream could we create to propel ourselves forward? Because every part of the movement from the beginning of insurrection of African people was a part of liberation, that was a part forward. But we took it as if it was to come forward in terms of joining a culture, of becoming part of something, as opposed to liberating ourselves to see that we was the creators of something. We created America. When we stop looking at America creates us, We created America. We gave America meaning by the sweat and the brows of our own work ethics, our own tears, our own blood, our own sweat. Let me give you an example. I was going down the Nile River, and what amazed me that I found elements of things that was in Mississippi, and I'm like, wow, how is that possible that we maintain this connection and we can find elements that this water that we ride, this river that we ride and call the Mississippi is connected somehow to this Nile River, and that it carries elements. It's almost like a blueprint for us to return to remember who we truly are. We need to remember who we truly. If there's no, I said to somebody yesterday, and they laughed. If we stop trying to die and get to heaven and get to living, we might get someplace. But see, we think that there's an end product. There's not an end product. There's an evolution of humanity and humanity's discovery. Humanity evolving and developing itself. We go back to look at Kemet and look at Africa. Our ancestors already laid a blueprint. They was already doing what quantum physics say are interpreting today as the wisdom of the ancient ancestors. Their medicine, the blueprint for medicine is there on a temple wall. If we can interpret the hieroglyphics, we need to go fetch it and bring it home to ourselves. Dismantle the racial, the enslaved way of looking at life, and look at ourselves as a species who is evolving. Even in the time of slavery, we was evolving what? Our soul body, not our physical body, our soul body.
I'm wondering as I listen, how, because there's a lot of pressure, if you will, to cause us to think or be or act a certain way that it is likely contrary to us realizing our fullness. So the question I ask is, how do we overcome individually and collectively this subtle pressure that's being applied towards us?
Forget to remember. I know that sounds trite. To forget to remember. Can I allow myself a point of stillness where I can forget something, where I can remember? Can I sit still long enough to unravel my own inner mystery? And that comes with the initiatory process. When we send people on the vision course, or we send them into initiation, we sending them especially to discover that wonderful gift that they brought individually with them. What is that gift? How do that person bring forth his own genius?
I almost see that as a I just, when you said that, like, forget, how do you say that? Forgetting to remember. Forget to remember. So when you say that, would you think like someone who has this perception that's so strong that they have made it their reality, and so that perception itself, if it's toxic, they should be trying to forget that and live in the now, and really see reality for what it is versus hindering themselves?
That's on point. Like teaching ourselves how to sit with a thought and understanding that that thought creates after itself. That thought in itself creates after itself. And then we learn that the thing that outside of us, we blame something outside of us, but it's our perception. Back to perception. How you're perceiving that thing out here, how it's impacting your internal being. That way that you perceive, if you perceive yourself as not belonging, then guess what? There's a part of you going to feel that not belonging, that sense of not belonging. If I perceive that I'm not to go to say, for example, as I grew up, there was places that said for black and white only. As a child, you didn't see that. All you saw was signs. You didn't see that it was a black and white. And the story is that this young girl who walks up to a water fountain, she has on her white socks, right? So she goes to the fountain, a white, she don't know that she wants water. But when she goes there, there's a racist comes and pull her away and said, little girl, don't you know this is for white only? And the little girl looks down and say, but I'm wearing my white socks. The innocent, I'm wearing my white socks. Think about it. All I want is water. Water don't have no color. You say it's white, but I'm wearing my white sock. So why not acceptable? Why isn't this acceptable enough for me to have to drink of water? So it's like we perceive a world in that's against us. And once we change that perception and begin to have a different idea, a different way of seeing the world around us, we can begin to change the way we live and the way we project into the world.
I have a question. I'm gonna ask Sophia to take the first stab at this one. The question I have is, can a case, since perception is reality or reality is perception, can a case be made that all intelligent beings are victim of the same thing? And if so, how does that factor into the conversation?
I think that all humans are victims of that, because going back to what Mama Tahira said about being in that meditative space of evolution, being in that space of, outside of the physical realm, we all kind of seek that transitional space. So I think we all as humans have the power to be in reality and perceive something else, right? Perceive some other 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 realm, other whatever. We I think we as intelligent beings have that. But I think that certain cultures are better at controlling perceptions than other. I think that certain cultures have, maybe their innate gift is the ability to change the mass perception, or change the physical perception. And some cultures, see beyond this world all the time, right? There's some cultures that are, reincarnating cultures, cultures who believe in, a lot of things coming back. Those people are always seeing the change. They're always seeing like the crossing between that reality and perception are just depending on where you are in your own evolutionary scale. But then there's some people who know how to control the perception, right? And they focus on that. And then there's some people that are angry at reality, right? So we're all kind of in our own polarizing places of evolution, right? I think, the place to freedom is that meditation, right? That's why we'll go back to elders. That's why our elders are so important, because their spirit is a little slower. They're a little closer to that meditative state. They just radiate a little more on another frequency that is more maybe relaxing to others, that is, hopeful to others. That's why our elders are so important. But when our elders don't function in that space, when they're just as polarized, either stuck in their reality or live in someone else's perception, it's not helpful for generations, because as humans, we are the only people who can struggle with these dichotomies of what's real, going, as a Black woman, my real place on this earth, and what others perceive my place on this earth. I think humans are the only people who who can even do this, right? This is a ode to our mental power. Now imagine if we perceived all of ourselves as kings and queens, right? Imagine if we perceived all ourselves as brothers and sisters. Imagine if we perceived everyone, as stewards of the earth. Everything would look completely different.
That made me think a lot about when we travel to places that are, my perception is like they might be struggling. Like it doesn't look like a developed country, like they need more food and access to things. But when you look at the people, talk to the people, they are happier than us Americans that are out here living the American, quote unquote, American dream. They're so much more happier. And I think it's because they find value in their perceptions. Like they're with their family. Their families stick so close together. They respect their elders and communicate with their elders. They take care of them. They're in the houses. They don't send them to rest homes. They're all together as a family, and they're just so happy with the basics that they have. And I wonder if COVID kind of helped us do that in America. I feel like there's a shift in the dynamic because a lot of us were forced to be at home, had to look within and like sit back. And how does she say it again? Forget to remember. So, we were all forced to really take a look at our lives, and now you see left and right, people are quitting their 9 to 5s and just going to do what they love to do. Because all those other third world countries, when you see those happy kids playing on the street and families getting together, cooking outside in the dirt, they dig up the dirt, start a fire, make their own meals, and they're just as happy as can be, feasting together. And I think we did a lot of that during this lockdown. I don't know if it'll continue now that things are opening back up, but I do sense people are starting to be more self-aware of their perception.
But don't you think it's like there's a push to get us away from it though, right? Like we got a taste of it when the pandemic. You guys remember seeing how the streets were so clean, the air was so clean, the animals were out, right? Like the world was breathing, and then what the government said, oh, no, y'all got to go back downtown and spend that money. You got to get back to the hustle. You can't stay home forever. Like they don't want, it's like, oh, y'all don't want that because it's not about health no more, right? It ain't about the virus no more, right? No, you rather have me in the office breathing God knows what because I got to pay money, or, I'm fueling this machine. I'm fueling this perception driving machine. And when I stop doing that, you freak out and I'm wrong, right? There's something wrong with me when I just want to be with my family, stay home, maybe even grow my own food. Then something wrong with you, right? You weird. This world is so, this is so backwards. Everything that feels natural, everything that feels right is wrong here.
Ia Tahira, can you help us get through this?
There's two things popped out. You guys put a lot on the board. I like what Novella was talking about, and I wrote a little story about what I saw in Seawall. And Seawall is one of the oldest town. I think it's about 4,000 years old. But the houses, the structures was made of sand and clay, and most of those structures are still there, remnants of it. But the point I want to make is I watched these young people, young boys, maybe 7 years old, on the donkey cart. And when it caught my eyes, then it took me back to the tricycle in the States, and that people spend a lot of money, go out Christmas time and buy these tricycles and give them to their children. And the children cry and hate them a lot of times. But here these boys were having fun riding their donkey carts. Not only were they having fun riding the donkey cart, they was also able to help their family, right? And picking up stuff and making it home. It was so fun watching how they was riding the donkey cart. And you better get out the way because you would get knocked down by the donkey cart. You laughing. I'm laughing. I'm like, wow. It took me back to my childhood. Like that's the kind of fun I had. I didn't know anything about a modern bicycle and a modern wagon. Sometimes we made our own wagon and rolled it down the hill and had fun. So what happened to this creative imagination that we don't allow that imagination, that genius to come out. We tell it how to think, how to create, not create a space where it can be creator or we see what it's creating and bring it forth. No, you go to school, you got to be a doctor, you're going to be the judge, you're going to be the police, you're going to. We start naming all the things a child is going to be as opposed to allowing this genius to emerge and be a creator on the earth. That's one. Sophia's string was like, I love Sophia's string because it is one of the things recognizing how we are the cork in the wheel. And then you have to go back and look at the history that shaped that cork in the wheel. At the turn of the century, at the time of rise of industrialization and the World War II, we there was a welfare created to sustain the families whose husband had been taken, right? In the process of that, you have a migration of black folks from sharecropping, from farming, because they no longer need the cotton and the things that we made on the farm, right? So here you found the city is full with all of these people. What was the solution? We can't get rid of you, so you become a reserve in this cork of a wheel for cheap labor. And so we still can't satisfy, we still don't have the solution. So we create welfare becomes a permanent system of subsistence, a system that entraps that soul body over there. And so we become conditioned to rely upon it, to advocate for it. You see, we keep the cork we show up and we keep these wheels going because we advocate for more of the same that keeps us oppressed and suppressed. So when enough energy, enough thinking, enough awakeness come, we begin to have a different conversation. Guess what? We lessen that cork. That cork starts to slow down, and then we see what America is doing, creating more artificial intelligence. Why? You have to think and be on your cues to think about what's in front of you, like why these things, the system that runs on your back and sustains itself on our back. But we change the conversation around it. Can't change the thoughts that we give it. And that will take time. That means changing our educational system, changing the conversation, and having dialogue like these to begin to look at ways that we can unblock ourselves, unlock our own genius.
Yes, because I gotta ask while I have this is an amazing opportunity to be able to ask someone like Mama Tahira, because when she was speaking, this Roe versus Wade stuff came up for me, because thinking about the difference between perception and reality, and how you said that, that they're trying to basically take their creator, we are the creator, but they're taking all that creation from us, right? And I don't, the Roe versus Wade made me kind of just want to understand how come this does not scream hypocrisy between perception and reality for most people. Meaning, the reality is children in this country go hungry. Our services for children in this country has significantly decreased. Our child care has significantly decreased. Children have a not an easier path, a harder path forward in this country. Then why is the perception that we want that the creator, meaning the woman who has the power to create, has to give it over to the government, because the government that can't take over the children that are here today can dictate the children to be born tomorrow? Can you, as an elder, and these are elders making these decisions, as an elder, can maybe you help me understand what is the thinking, or do elders think it's that easy to change our perception and our reality? What is, like, how is this even a thing? I just need to hear from an elder, someone who's been here long time, and who knows that, that things are so backwards. Why is this even a thing, and how come we don't scream con? Like, how come this is even a topic? Because in terms of America taking care of Black children, where are the receipts? you know so I just want to hear from an elder. Just take this opportunity, in terms of, the government taking everything from us, also our ability to create, which is a responsibility given to women by God. Why is that like, how, why are, I need to understand. I'm wanting to hear if you could just maybe help me understand how come other people don't understand the difference between the perception and the reality when it's right in front of their face.
When you program a mind, you program generations of people to think a certain way as a program. See, we think of education system as an upgrade, okay? When it became open to us, it was an upgrade in a way, but in an upgrade that was not controlled or managed by us. If you go back and could just gleam into the civil rights era, there was a radical and a non-radical. Okay, the radical conversation was we was asking for an educational system that not to change or to integrate an education system. We was asking for access to build an educational system for ourselves. But instead, we had the other more agreeable politicians who agreed to integration would be the way, because they needed to satisfy that radical element in our community, somehow to quiet it down. So what got voted in was this integration of school. So there goes your mind, there goes the thinking of our people, because we bought it. We bought it because it said it makes us better. We will be better as a result of, because we wasn't thinking our way through again. And it's not a blame, it's us now diving in and seeing that for ourselves. And now we know what has happened. Now we know what happened to us. How now do we capture that and recalibrate another way for ourselves? One, stop saying they. They have. So I feel I'm really calling you on. They have. Every time we say they, that means we give up power to something outside of ourselves. A system is in place and designed to do exactly what it's doing. When we can get that in our heads, we will be all right. It's not a friction. We're not going to have a revolution. It's that we might have a revolution of mind to shift our thinking and begin to understand that as long as I believe that there's a force outside of me, greater than me, that controls my reality, that controls the way I see the world, it will continue to do that. But when I start to look at it and say, okay, if I'm showing up for this job, I show up now for this job because I know I need this to sustain me. This is not my end product. I'm the creator over here of what my end product of my vision wants to look like. But I may need this situation over here to sustain me to go forward. We are clarifying and owning our power. And even when we got our children may be resistant. We asked Johnny, is this job a way that you can sustain your family while you create what you want? What calls you the most? We began to re-educate the mind, re-educate ourselves and change the language that we use to capture what we want in this world. And it's not an overnight process. We start with ourselves. We check in with ourselves, and we can start that individually, just observing my own thoughts. I blame my parents. I blame those things outside of me until I know better. And when I know better, I chart another way for me to go forward. Did that answer the question?
So I just want to try to encapsulate what was just said because I think it's important. So ultimately, what I'm hearing Ia Tahira say is that it's us as individuals. We are responsible for our own individual evolution by virtue of the fact that we choose what thoughts we want to keep in mind. Is that a fair statement?
It's a fair statement. If I can quote a thing that came for me while I was away, it's like if we can go back in the teaching, because we definitely went on a trip, a spiritual evolutionary trip, and we was able to have the discussions about interpreting ways forward. When we're looking at history, we don't throw out everything. Even looking at our own history, we say, okay, those things didn't work. That didn't work. That was a kind of relationship I had with my parents. But to think about it in terms of where you are and where they were, and their evolution, they may not have had the language or the wit or knowledge, words to even put into place, but they had something that emanated a different way of being. So we have to go back and look at sometimes it's not about it's about listening to that deeper wisdom that we already have. Each one of you have a deep wisdom. Each one of us have our own wisdom where we can dive in and look at the places that we need to develop and those things that we need to forgive and release in relationship to family, in relationship to community, in relationship to many things. They serve us as a certain point. But then there comes a time that it's like, I don't know if you got harvest when you sift through and you take your best seeds and you begin to plant the best seeds and create the best foundation for yourself to go forward. That's all right. The passages are. It's teaching us how to create the foundation to go forward into adulthood, to go forward into developing this different layer of adult life. That's all they are. That for me right now is how do I walk through life and death and understand that death is not an end product, but to really bring home all of those things that mystify us or that's been given to us in a way that we are afraid of them. When we embody this walking through that fear, embody walking in your dark space and learning the greater lessons as opposed to getting rid of something.
I do have one. You guys try not to laugh when I ask this question, but I feel like I should ask it only because I want to see if we all are on the same page or if we're all on different pages. And the question is this: how do we define reality? If it's not, let's separate it from perception and let's figure out how do we define it.
I almost see reality as looking at what's in front of you and being present. Like this, like every reality can change at any given time, any given moment, but like this moment right now in reality, we're talking on a podcast and speaking. I can see it being very black and white. And then when you get deeper into it, I can say, in reality, there's a cloud above me, but to me, the cloud looks like a heart. To someone else, it looks like a star, that's where you get into the perception side of things.
So I, so I had, my initial feeling was like no. right? That there is no real reality. But I went to Google and because I just wanted to really understand what's the agreed upon definition. And it is the world or the state of things as they actually exist, as opposed to an idealistic idea of them. So to me, that doesn't help because it's still in the eye. Well, because it's still in the eye of the beholder to me. If anyone's grown up in a family, you've known that you've seen the same situation. You might have been in the same room, same stuff happened, and then everybody got a different side of it. So is what you actually saw true? I think reality is individual. I don't think there is a collective reality. And I think those that say that there is are only talking about one aspect, meaning someone would tell you that everything scientific is real. But then if you really know science, you know that everything scientific is a theory. So then it's how can it be real? So it's really, reality is individual, and our shared realities, I think, are our collective economic and community values.
I'm reminded of a story. I'd just like to interject this story real quick before Tahira responds. There were these 7 blind men in India who were taken to meet an elephant. They never ever saw an elephant. Of course, they were blind. They heard about it, but they didn't know. So when they got to the elephant, the leader put each person on a different part of the elephant. Right. And so one guy had the trunk, and so the leader said, well, what's an elephant? And the guy said, well, it's this big trunk looking thing that moves around and real strong. Another guy had the tail. What's an elephant? It's just this little hard piece of meat and flesh and hairs. Another guy had the foot. What's an elephant? Well, it's this big round thing with these hard toes, right? And so after all these different experiences, the leader said, so what is an elephant? And who's telling the truth? And I think what you made me think about was that story, because I feel like we all get part of the reality, but that doesn't mean we can discount the other, because that's how we have a whole. I appreciate you for helping me remember that.
I would say, imagine if you were able to ask the elephant, right? Who he is, right? He might tell you, I'm some ancient wildebeest. Like, he might, it's endless. It is endless.
Tahira, would you like to help us share with us?
I love novella. I think novella is on point because to me, that is that reality. The here and now is the reality. And other than that, we over all in all these places, we either in the past or the future, as opposed to right here now. So I don't know that I could give it a better definition. And then that collected reality, we all have this different ways. I think it was illustrated with the elephant story. But how do we utilize these realities for the whole, right? Is that going to lead us to that question? Because that's our key. Because all of us in this square represents the whole. Well, where is the whole? The whole is in the center, because everything moves out around us in this swirling way and comes back to center. Always in creation, everything is right now. We think we're moving, but really, we think we're sitting still. But actually, the earth is doing this. We are in this spiral movement as we sit here, energetically. So when we begin to honor each other's perception, each other's way of seeing, we can bring together these gifts. We can harvest these gifts to create a new way forward. That's my thinking. I could be totally wrong, but that's what I see it as on the board is back to us. But we got a lot of work to do before we get there.
Yeah, thank you for that story, Didosio, because it paints a picture of really someone's reality is like where they are now in this world. So like where are you in your space now? Like I'm happy. I love my life. So my reality is full of love. But other people, you know, they're because of the mindset that we all need to collectively work on changing. Some people's reality is harsh. And I just think of Safia, the Roe versus Wade conversation. I had to I just don't watch the news anymore at this point. Just because it's just so, you're right, it's hypocritical because they're focused on this aspect of life creation, but not caring about the lives created out. You know, you wouldn't have women needing that service if these children were taken care of properly. You know, speaking with people that work in the foster system, it's really hard to hear their stories. It is really sad. And, you know, you think, okay, if they change their perception on, you know, I'm thinking, would you ask that child in the foster care system, change your perception and, you know, your reality will be better. It's not, it's deeper than that because there's other people that are forcing their perceptions on them. That's so strong, especially when there's a child involved. It's so strong that they're almost enslaved in their own perception, which is causing them to be in this reality, which is in result pushes on that generational curse for a lot of the kids that are in and out of that system. Something you guys talked about in the last episode, I just noticed everyone was speaking from a different place. You know, you have the youth, like we feel like, oh, the elders aren't here with us, they're not present. But then you had someone that speaks with elders who sees the elders say they're here. The youth are just not asking the right questions, or the youth are not, you know, So that's why I said we need to talk about our multiple perceptions because we're all just speaking from a certain place. And like Tahira was saying, like, how do we get everyone to have that collective view on life?
So that kind of makes me wonder the question around what are some of the things that we can start focusing on in order to bring us closer with regard to how we perceive or how we engage, perceive things or how we engage in reality today from the perspective of a healthy, holistic, elder-driven community.
I feel like we have to start with the question that you started with. Because, you know, you got to make sure you're meeting people, you know, at least some, you know, I feel like we might have to have that check. You know, is what's your reality? How do you define reality? Because that could be some of the root of the disconnect. If I were to say so, is that we, you know, all like the elephant, right? Like the blind man and the elephant, you know, that the elder is just one person touching the elephant and the youth is just one person touching the elephant. And then they argued about what an elephant looked like. You know, I do think it's establishing that baseline of reality. And I use in novella, if reality is where we are right now, then that's where we start from. You know, if we can agree that our reality is where we are right now, then how would you heal me now, right? How can I help you now?
I'm just right. Like that is a question that I do want to ask, like going forward, where are you now? Before you have a debate with somebody, that might be the first question. Instead of like, how are you? It's where are you right now? What space are you in right now? Because then I can figure out how this conversation could go. Because I was listening to something about, should you sugarcoat things to people when you're trying to get your points across? Do you need to rip the Band-Aid? And I struggle with that because sometimes it just makes more sense to just rip that Band-Aid and be real, cut dry, but you can't. some people won't receive the message. They'll miss the message because of where they are at that moment. So maybe that'll be my next thing. I'll stop asking people, how are you? I'll just say, where are you right now?
It's a good talking point. Where are you now? I think we do a lot of check in and where are you now in terms of just checking in with people to see. It's a good way of beginning a talking circle. I think to get at this whole crux of what it is to be elder will take this talking circle. They would take many rounds of talking and gathering. And the other part of that, I think that you are the elders for the next generation coming. So it's like I would encourage your generation to look at beginning to now, since we have the language, we recalibrating this energy and question around what it is to be elder. How do I perceive myself as an elder in the community, and what will I need to cultivate that to go forward? Because most of you, I think, Novella probably the youngest, I don't know, maybe you guess it. Docio is at the point where Docio is in the point where we be calling him to initiate into elderhood. And I think Sophia is there. Are you 42? In your 40s, Sophia? Not yet? Okay. Age is relative to it's not this Western way of seeing age, okay? So let's just drop it. So we would begin to cultivate that elder that goes forward, because that is what this new generation, this is what the new you guys are, the new leaders will need if we are going to create healthy communities. You have to, I can apologize, but you have to up it and become, like my mother said, now you have to help me out. I had to become the mother of the house at 8 years of age because there was a vacuum. There was something, there was a place that needed to be filled. So we at that critical mass where we, as those of us who are seeing and looking at the world, began to derive a place. What are we calling for? How will we develop that core piece to go forward and be able to hold what I like to call as a placenta in our community? Because everybody won't become woke at the same time. There will be a few of us wake up. So those who wake up will need to be able to take on bigger responsibilities. That's what I see in terms of this question. And asking yourself, and I mean, and you guys do a great job in answering that question for yourself, because you've seen it. If you can interpret it and what it means, that means you can see yourself as an elder.
Awesome. I have one final question before we give our closing remarks. And it's connected, but maybe in a bit of a tangent. And the question is, how much do our feelings impact our perception?
If I could start, I would say completely. I mean, yeah, absolutely, completely. I think that's how we, as children, started to form this thing of perception and the difference between perception and reality. I think that underlying that is feelings. The child feels like things are so unfair when they don't get what they want. And so the perception is things are unfair. The feeling, right? The feeling comes up first, but the reality may be, it's fair. The reality could be, like we discussed, it could be different things. But I think that feelings is the root. I think that feelings, because I think that's the, that's the message from the other side. Like that's the as humans, what we can grasp as some other thing coming over me, driving me, is the feeling. I think that's what makes us different human evolving creatures is that we have feelings, and those feelings are strong in us, strong enough to change our behavior, strong enough to change our thinking, strong enough to change our lives. I think that it's feelings that drive all of this, right? We can say fear, right? Every feeling, I think, drives everything. I would say, yeah, 1,000%.
I agree so much. I think about the phrase mind your vibrations and uplift your vibrations. So sometimes that feeling of stress and anger, that causes me to see any little task someone asks me to do as taxing. So I perceive it as like, I'm overwhelmed. But in reality, it doesn't have to be that way. So, when I'm faced with a challenge at work, at first that feeling is like, ugh, stress, whatever. And then I have to sit back and I'm like, no, Novella, you have to see this as an opportunity, not something that's gonna hold you back from anything. So then when I change that feeling and then I start to perceive it as an opportunity, then I'm more engaged and encouraged to, finish the project. And, and then in reality, everything's done. I did a great job. But if I stay in that space of just stress, we had someone that was in my previous position that was just, he embodied stress and anger and doubt, and it showed in the work, and it showed in like the collaborations to work with them. And I can see like now, if the mindset was changed, then things would be so much smoother, and then his feelings could be better. But it really does start within.
Yeah, I agree. And I heard two ways of expressing. I heard Sophia talk about that place of childhood, like feeling also that feeling that warns us or informs us about something that's unsettling. And that was one feeling that I heard that Sophia sort of touched on, that childhood feeling. And a lot of times we ignore that feeling. So there is that feeling even with us when we walk into a room. You can know what the temperature is. You know what to expect. Receives gonna come out of that room, and so those are informing you. It doesn't inform you in a way, I think, to resist. It informs us in a way to know how to approach that situation. It's like, oh, I feel that energy. I feel that. So now I can choose the way I want to approach that situation. I think sometimes that's the feeling that I'm used to, walking into a room and perceiving the world and being able to temper that as a way of being informed of something danger, of something good, either way.
Okay, well, unfortunately, we are reaching the end of today's session. It has been, again, remarkable, illuminating, and enlightening. We'll have our final thoughts. Novella, would you like to begin?
I want to start by thanking everyone for this conversation. I think you unlocked something in me today, and my biggest takeaway is really trying to meet people where they're at, and start asking, where are you right now when having these conversations?
Yeah, another amazing conversation. But, my biggest takeaway is recognizing places where I give up my power, and recognizing places where, I am referring to the unknown they, where I need to be referring to where I am and what I can do and what's in my control. So I thank you. Appreciate everyone.
Wow. Amen. Ashe. Bless you, Queen. That you just touched me with that sharing. So I'm honored to be trusted with that. This has been my mind races when we have these discussions, because it seems like with every word there's five or 600 more that we want to say to delve a little deeper. and I'm looking forward to what comes next. I'm honored to be a part of this. I'm graciously honored to have Ia Tahira in my life. And I think from this one, I've taken away that we do have a lot to do in the way of helping people to understand perception versus reality, or reality versus perception. And I think if we apply the right approach, we can do that quite easily. It might take a little practice, but it's doable. And that's it for me. You, Tahira?
Well, my takeaway is a heartfelt gratitude for each one of you. You're so inspiring, and I'm humbled to be able to be invited to be in this conversation, to be even acknowledged for being an elder in the world. So gratitude to all of you. My heart is full. Thank you.
Wow. It's an honor.
Do you have a question you want to ask us? Heard something that resonated with you? Or maybe you just want to share a story about how your elder impressed you. We want to hear from you because we're interested in taking a deeper dive into the elderhood conversation, and your input helps. Please send your questions, comments, or observations to info@comforthomesake.com. And remember, someday you too will join the ranks of the